power of passages in certain poems read when we were young, irrational doorways as they were through which the mystery of fact, the wildness and the pang of life, stole into our hearts and thrilled them. The words have now perhaps become mere polished surfaces for us, but lyric poetry and music are alive and significant only in proportion as they fetch these vague vistas of a life continuous with our own, beckoning and inviting, yet ever eluding our pursuit. We are alive or dead to the eternal inner message of the arts according as we have kept or lost this mystical susceptibility. A more pronounced step forward on the mystical ladder is found in an extremely frequent phenomenon, that sudden feeling, namely, which sometimes sweeps over us, of having been here before, as if at some indefinite past time, in just this place, with just these people, we were already saying just these things. As Tennyson writes, quote, "Moreover, something is or seems that touches me with mystic gleams, like glimpses of forgotten dreams, of something felt like something here, of something done I know not where, such as no language may declare." Close quote. Footnote. In a letter to Mr. B.P. Blood, Tennyson reports of himself as follows, quote, "I have never had any revelations through anesthetics, but a kind of waking trance, this for a better word, I have frequently had, quite up from boyhood when I have been all alone. This has come upon me through repeating my own name to myself silently, till all at once, as it were out of the intensity of the consciousness of individuality, individuality itself seemed to dissolve and fade away into boundless being, and this not a confused state, but the clearest, the surest of the surest, utterly beyond words, where death was an almost laughable impossibility. The loss of personality, if so it were, seeming no extinction, but the only true life. I am ashamed of my feeble description. Have I not said the state is utterly beyond words?" Close quote. Professor Tyndall, in a letter, recalls Tennyson's saying of this condition, quote, "By God Almighty, there is no delusion in the matter. It was no nebulous ecstasy, but a state of transcendent wonder, associated with absolute clearness of mind." Close quote. End footnote. Sir James Crichton Browne has given the technical name of dreamy states to these sudden invasions of vaguely reminiscent consciousness. They bring a sense of mystery and of the metaphysical duality of things, and the feeling of an enlargement of perception which seems imminent, but which never completes itself. In Dr. Crichton Browne's opinion, they connect themselves with the perplexed and scarred disturbances of self-consciousness, which occasionally precede epileptic attacks. I think that this learned alienist takes a rather absurdly alarmist view of an intrinsically insignificant phenomenon. He follows it along the downward ladder to insanity. Our path pursues the upward ladder chiefly. The divergence shows how important it is to neglect no part of a phenomenon's connections, for we make it appear admirable or dreadful according to the context by which we set it off. Somewhat deeper plunges into mystical consciousness are met with in yet other dreamy states. Such feelings as these, which Charles Kingsley describes, are surely far from being uncommon, especially in youth. Quote, "When I walk the fields, I am oppressed now and then with an innate feeling that everything I see has a meaning, if I could but understand it. And this feeling of being surrounded with truths which I cannot grasp amounts to indescribable awe sometimes. Have you not felt that your real soul was imperceptible to your mental vision except in a few hallowed moments?" Close quote. A much more extreme state of mystical consciousness is described by J. A. Simons, and probably more persons than we suspect could give parallels to it from their own experience. Writes Simons, quote, "Suddenly, at church or in company, or when I was reading, and always, I think, when my muscles were at rest, I felt the approach of the mood. Irresistibly it took possession of my mind and will, lasted what seemed an eternity, and disappeared in a series of rapid sensations which resembled the awakening from anesthetic influence. One reason why I disliked this kind of trance was that I could not describe it to myself. I cannot even now find words to render it intelligible. It consisted in a gradual but swiftly progressive obliteration of space, time, sensation, and the multitudinous factors of experience which seem to qualify what we are pleased to call our self. In proportion as these conditions of ordinary consciousness were subtracted, the sense of an underlying or essential consciousness acquired intensity. At last, nothing remained but a pure, absolute, abstract self. The universe became without form and void of content. But self persisted, formidable in its vivid keenness, feeling the most poignant doubt about reality, ready, as it seemed, to find existence break, as breaks a bubble round about it. And what then? The apprehension of a coming dissolution, the grim conviction that this state was the last state of the conscious self, the sense that I had followed the last thread of being to the verge of the abyss, and had arrived at demonstration of eternal Maya or illusion, stirred or seemed to stir me up again. The return to ordinary conditions of sentient existence began by my first recovering the power of touch, and then by the gradual though rapid influx of familiar impressions and diurnal interests. At last I felt myself once more a human being, and though the riddle of what is meant by life remained unsolved, I was thankful for this return from the abyss, this deliverance from so awful an initiation into the mysteries of skepticism. This trance recurred with diminishing frequency until I reached the age of 28. It served to impress upon my growing nature the phantasmal unreality of all the circumstances which contribute to a merely phenomenal consciousness. Often have I asked myself with anguish, on waking from that formless state of denuded, keenly sentient being, which is the unreality, the trance of fiery, vacant, apprehensive, skeptical self from which I issue, or these surrounding phenomena and habits which veil that inner self, and build a self of flesh and blood conventionality? Again, are men the factors of some dream, the dreamlike unsubstantiality of which they comprehend at such eventful moments? What would happen if the final stage of the trance were reached?" Close quote. In a recital like this, there is certainly something suggestive of pathology. Footnote: Crichton Browne expressly says that Simon's, quote, highest nerve centers were in some degree enfeebled or damaged by these dreamy mental states which afflicted him so grievously. Close quote. Simons was, however, a perfect monster of many-sided cerebral efficiency, and his critic gives no objective grounds whatever for his strange opinion, save that Simons complained occasionally, as all susceptible and ambitious men complain, of lassitude and uncertainty as to his life's mission. End footnote. The next step into mystical states carries us into a realm that public opinion and ethical philosophy have long since branded as pathological, though private practice and certain lyric strains of poetry seem still to bear witness to its ideality. I refer to the consciousness produced by intoxicants and anesthetics, especially by alcohol. The sway of alcohol over mankind is unquestionably due to its power to stimulate the mystical faculties of human nature, usually crushed to earth